The incident that opened the gates. If you think you've seen darkness, you haven't even scratched the surface. Hit subscribe, like, comment, because what you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about life behind bars. The screams echoed through the cell block long before anyone understood what had happened. It was 4:13 a.m. inside Red River State Penitentiary, a concrete maze wedged between rusted industrial lots and an abandoned rail line. To most people outside, it was just another prison. But to the inmates and guards trapped inside, Red River had its own economy, its own laws, and its own monsters. The emergency lights flickered as correctional officers stormed toward cell 209, home to a man whose name had become legend long before he ever stepped foot inside those walls. Marcus Shift LaRue. Once a rising figure in an East Coast trafficking ring, Shift was infamous for moving products in ways investigators could never trace. His arrest had made national headlines. Prosecutors promised he'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. But while they thought locking him away would end his influence, they underestimated the thing that made him dangerous. Shift didn't need freedom to build an empire. He only needed people. When the guards reached the cell, they found another inmate on the floor, breathing, but barely. The man's face was pale, his hands trembling. Something wasn't right. He kept pointing at the door, trying to form words, but all he could whisper was, "It wasn't him, it wasn't him." The officers looked at Shift. He was sitting calmly on the edge of his bunk, elbows on his knees, staring straight ahead. No panic, no guilt, no explanation, just silence. It was the kind of silence that made even hardened guards uneasy. Shift had never been in the same room as a victim in his criminal cases. He'd orchestrated things from a distance, always keeping his hands clean. But now, inside a cell watched by cameras, under constant supervision, something had happened that shouldn't have been possible. And it wouldn't be the last time. By sunrise, investigators began reviewing footage, only to find the first shock of the day. Between 3:58 and 4:11 a.m., every camera in cell block C went down. Not a glitch. Not static. Total darkness. The power logs made it stranger. The cut hadn't come from a grid. It had been manually triggered from inside the prison. Who had access? Only 3 guards, and none had been near the panel. Yet the panel had been opened. The warden, Kenton Briggs, a former Marine, with a jaw carved from stone and a temper sharpened by stress, personally ordered interviews with every inmate on the block. Most refused to talk. Some genuinely knew nothing. But a few whispered the same thing. Shift warned him. Shift told him not to cross the wrong man. Shift never touches anyone. He doesn't have to. The incident spread through the prison like wildfire. Guards tightened their patrols. Inmates kept their heads down. The more Briggs pushed, the more he realized something unsettling. Every path led back to Shift, not because he'd done something, but because someone wanted it to look like he had. And that someone was close. Too close. Later that afternoon, Officer Celeste Morrow, one of the newest guards on the unit, discovered a folded note tucked beneath the surveillance monitor. She almost tossed it until she noticed the way her name was written, like the writer had been shaking or terrified. She opened it carefully. 3 words. "He's watching US." No signature. No handwriting she recognized. Just a message that chilled her more than the cold concrete under her boots. She showed it to Warden Briggs, who dismissed it as an inmate prank. They test rookies. Don't give them the reaction they want. But Celeste knew fear when she saw it, and whoever wrote that note wasn't trying to scare her. They were begging her to pay attention. Meanwhile, Shift remained silent in his cell, observing, studying, waiting. Word circulated that he'd refused a lawyer. Refused questioning, refused recreation time. He was a man preparing for something no one could yet see. And then, as night settled over Red River, a discovery was made on the 2nd floor that brought every officer on duty running. A hidden compartment, one no one knew existed, had been forced open behind a crumbling section of the wall. Inside was a small wrapped object. When Officer Morrow peeled back the cloth, her heart nearly stopped. It was a guard's master keycard. A keycard from a guard who hadn't shown up to work in 2 days. A guard who was now officially missing. And on the cloth drawn in black ink was a single symbol, an arrow pointing back towards cell 209. Straight to Marcus Shift LaRue, the man who knew too much. The prison went into lockdown before dawn, but the silence inside Red River felt louder than the alarms. Inmates stood at their cell doors, whispering through the cracks. Guards moved with clipped steps, avoiding eye contact. Everyone felt it, the invisible tension that wrapped itself around the entire penitentiary like a tightening noose. Officer Celeste Morrow barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the missing guard's key card wrapped in cloth, the crude arrow pointing directly toward shift cell. She replayed every detail of the last few days, searching for something, anything, that made sense. But the truth was beginning to feel like a shadow. The closer she got, the more it slipped away. Warden Briggs called an emergency briefing. His voice was gravelly, his expression locked behind the same hardened stare he had worn since his Marine days. Listen up. We've got a missing officer. We've got a compromised security system. And we've got speculation spreading faster than we can shut it down. Anyone caught fueling rumors will be written up. He looked straight at Celeste when he said it, not with anger, but with warning. Shift was brought into the interrogation room 3 hours later. His wrists were cuffed, though everyone in that room knew he didn't need his hands to be dangerous. He sat calmly, posture relaxed, as if waiting for a job interview rather than questioning in a high-security prison. Briggs leaned forward. "Where's Officer Dwyer?" Shift didn't blink. "If he's missing, that's unfortunate. You think this is a joke?" Shift's eyes lifted slowly, meeting the warden's. They were steady, calculated, unreadable. "People disappear in here all the time, Warden. You know that better than anyone." Celeste felt a chill crawl up her arms. Shift wasn't lying. Prisons swallowed people, guards and inmates alike. But this felt different, like the disappearance was a message woven into a larger design. Briggs slammed a file onto the table. "Your block went dark. Cameras. Power. Everything. And then an inmate turns up half dead in your cell. You expect me to believe none of that involves you?" Shift tilted his head. "If I wanted someone gone, they would be gone. That man you found? Someone wanted you to look at me. You're smart enough to know that. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't bravado. It was a statement spoken with eerie certainty." Celeste watched him closely, and for the first time since he'd been arrested, she saw something beneath the surface. Fear. Not of Briggs, not of punishment, but of something or someone else inside the prison. When Briggs stormed out, frustrated, Celeste lingered behind. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone with the man whose name haunted the entire facility. "Why the note?" she finally asked. "Who's watching us?" Shift turned his gaze to her, and for a moment, the world outside that interrogation room didn't exist. "Officer Morrow," he said quietly, "you ever look into the old maintenance tunnels beneath this place?" "No." "You should." She frowned. "What do the tunnels have to do with a missing guard?" Shift leaned forward until his chained wrists hit the table. "Everything." Before she could ask more, 2 guards entered to escort him back to his cell. But as he was led away, Shift didn't look defeated. He looked like a man who knew the storm had only just begun. Hours later, Celeste made a decision she wasn't sure she'd survive. She went to the tunnels. The air beneath Red River was thick, stale, and heavy with the smell of mold and rust. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing old pipes, cracked concrete, and graffiti from decades of forgotten inmates. Some markings looked fresh, too fresh. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Close. She held her breath, gripping her radio. But the signal died the moment she clicked it. Dead zone. Just like the cameras. She edged forward, heart pounding, until her light caught something on the ground. A badge. Covered in dust. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. Officer Dwyer's badge. She backed away, instinctively, and collided with something solid. She spun around. A man stood in the shadows, face obscured, silent, watching her with a stillness that felt unnatural. He took one slow step forward. "Who are you?" she whispered. But he didn't answer. He only raised a hand and pointed, to the ceiling above them, to cell block C, to Shift. Before she could react, he stepped deeper into the darkness and vanished as if he'd never been there at all. Celeste ran. She didn't look back. She burst into the warden's office, breathless, holding the badge in her shaking hand. But before she could speak, Briggs raised his eyes from a report and delivered the words that would change everything. "We found a body." Her stomach twisted. "Dwyer." Briggs shook his head slowly. "No. Someone else." He pushed the report toward her, and when she read the name, her heart nearly stopped. It was the inmate who had collapsed in Shift's cell, dead, and in his pocket was another note. 3 words. "Shift is next." The final lockdown. The alarms exploded through Red River Penitentiary like a warning shot from a dying beast. Lights flickered, gates slammed shut, and a recorded voice echoed through every hallway. Facility on full lockdown. All personnel stand by. But Celeste Morrow wasn't standing by. Not anymore. She pushed through the chaos, replaying the words written on that small, torn scrap of paper. "Shift is next." The inmate who died in the infirmary had been fine hours earlier. Then suddenly, cardiac arrest. Too sudden. Too convenient. The timing wasn't coincidence. Someone inside the prison was orchestrating all of this. Someone powerful enough to move in shadows even the cameras couldn't penetrate. Someone who wanted Shift dead. The warden's office was swarmed with officers when she entered, but Briggs's expression sharpened as soon as he saw her. "Morrow." "Good. We've got a situation." She didn't waste time. "Shift is in danger. You need to move him to protective custody." Briggs shot her a look that hovered between disbelief and anger. "We can't relocate every inmate someone decides to threaten." "He's not just someone," she snapped. "People are disappearing. Officers are being targeted. Inmates are turning up dead. And every path leads back to him." Briggs paused. Not because he was convinced, but because he was afraid she might be right. Before he could respond, a frantic guard burst through the door, panting. "Warden, it's cell block C." Briggs stepped forward. "What happened?" The guard swallowed hard. The lights went out. All of them. And Shifty's gone. The room froze. Celeste's heart sank. Not with fear. With certainty. This was the moment everything had been building toward. They reached cell block C minutes later. The air smelled like burnt plastic, the metallic bite of an electrical failure lingering in the hall. The emergency lights flickered weakly, barely illuminating the wreckage. A shorted-out control panel, a broken camera, and an open cell door. Shift's cell door. Briggs clenched his jaw. Search everywhere. Tunnels, kitchen. Infirmary. No one leaves until we find him. But Celeste wasn't looking at the cell. She was looking at the floor. At the footprints. Not just one pair, 2. And one set was dragging. She followed them. Down the hallway. Around a corner. Toward a service stairwell rarely used except for maintenance. At the top of the stairs, she saw something taped to the wall. A playing card. The ace of spades. Clean. Crisp. Left intentionally. Shift's calling card. Except Shift didn't leave messages. Someone else wanted this discovered. Someone who wanted her to follow. She descended the steps, every turn tightening the knot in her stomach. The deeper she went, the colder the air became, until the concrete sweat with condensation and the pipes rattled like bones. At the bottom, she pushed open a heavy metal door and stepped into the old maintenance tunnels. The same tunnels where she had found Officer Dwyer's badge. The same tunnels where she saw a man fade into the darkness like smoke. Her flashlight cut through the shadows again, revealing more footprints, confirming she was close. Then she heard it. A voice. Low. Hoarse. Struggling. "Officer. Morrow. Shift." She ran. Not out of fear, but because she knew the next voice she heard might be silence. She rounded a corner and froze. Shift was on his knees, hands zip-tied behind him. His face was bruised, his shirt torn, but he was alive. Barely. Standing behind him was the same shadowed figure from before, wearing a guard's uniform without a name tag. His face remained obscured by the angle of the flickering emergency light. Celeste lifted her gun. Let him go. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. Instead, he stepped forward just enough for her to see his eyes, cold, exhausted, hollow. The eyes of someone who hadn't slept in days. The eyes of a man who looked like he'd been hunted too. Shift spoke with a rasp. He's not the one doing this. Celeste blinked. What? The figure raised his hands slowly, and for the first time Celeste noticed they were shaking. I tried to warn him, the man whispered. Warn all of you. Celeste felt her grip tighten. Warn us about what? He pointed toward the ceiling, toward the prison above them, toward the officers, chaotically trying to restore order, toward the warden's office. Then he said it. The sentence that rewired everything Celeste believed about Red River. It's not inmates killing officers. His voice cracked. It's officers killing inmates. Shift lifted his head, blood dripping from his lip. They're covering it up. All of it. Celeste's breath caught in her throat. But why? She whispered. The man stepped closer, his face finally visible. And though she'd only seen it once on a staff bulletin, she recognized him instantly. Officer Dwyer. Alive. Barely. He looked at her with a grief so deep it seemed to hollow out the tunnel around them. Because I found out who they were planning to kill next, he said. Celeste swallowed. Who? Dwyer stared at her. You. A distant explosion rocked the prison overhead. Lights shut off completely. The tunnels fell into total darkness. And in that suffocating black, Celeste finally understood. This wasn't a prison falling apart. It was a prison being taken over from the inside. And she was the next target.